In a world that worships loud voices, self-promotion, and power, humility sounds like weakness. But what if everything we've been taught about strength is backward? What if real power, the kind that brings peace, clarity, and influence, doesn't come from standing above others, but from kneeling lower? Richard E. Simmons III calls it quiet strength in an age of arrogance. And he's right, because when pride drives the world, humility becomes an act of rebellion. This isn't about shrinking back. It's about standing firm without the noise. So what does it look like to live a life powerful enough to move others, yet humble enough to serve them? Let's find out in The Power of a Humble Life. Hello, everyone. I'm John, and I'm really delighted to have you join us for this deep dive into some pretty powerful foundational truths today.
And hi all, I'm Emma. And yeah, we're your guides today, ready to sort of sift through Richard E. Simmons III, well, quite comprehensive work. We want to distill the core insights that, you might need for genuine transformation.
Welcome to Book Podcast Zone. Today, we are really immersing ourselves in Simmons's path, the one he lays out in The Power of a Humble Life journey. It's really structured, isn't it? Like a systematic, chapter-by-chapter rebuilding of how we even define success.
Right, moving away from just the outward stuff, the appearance, and focusing more on, well, internal character.
Exactly.
And that systematic structure, it's absolutely critical, I think, especially for you, the learner. We live in this age of just maximum velocity, right? But minimal depth.
Yeah, information overload everywhere.
Totally. It pushes us toward quick fixes, superficial benchmarks, who's got the loudest voice, the biggest valuation, the most followers. Simmons forces us to kind of stop chasing that fleeting success.
He really argues that humility isn't just some, gentle virtue for saints.
No, not at all. It's positioned as a necessary practical tool, almost for emotional and relational survival in today's world.
Survival, that's a strong word.
I think it fits because it provides that genuine connection, that inner security that, let's be honest, superficial success, the kind fueled purely by pride, it just can never deliver that in the long run.
Right. It's like empty calories.
Perfectly put. So if you want a life that actually lasts, one that has genuine influence, well, you need this foundation. He argues you need humility.
So our mission today is to go deep, chapter by chapter. We want to capture the intellectual and the emotional depth of this journey. I'm really going to spend time unpacking the mechanism, How does this change actually happen at each step?
Yeah, the mechanics are key.
We want to make sure you walk away with immediate, actionable insights, things that can actually cut through all the noise of daily life. So let's begin the ascent, shall we? Okay, chapter 1, the hunger for humility. Right off the bat, Simmons sets up this really powerful tension. He says our world is basically starved, desperately starved for genuine connection. Yeah. And why? Because it's plagued by, well, widespread ego clashes and this pervasive isolation. We feel disconnected, don't we? From ourselves, from others.
And it's exhausting. All that effort in the pursuit of appearing effortlessly successful, it takes a toll.
That's the central tension. And it's a painful one, like you said. We're out there chasing these benchmarks set by pride. Could be career milestones, could be social status, could be anything online.
And then you get there,
and
it feels hollow. The accomplishment just doesn't land the way you thought it would.
Simmons doesn't just theorize about this, though. He gives you that emotional gut punch. He spotlights the quiet regret.
Yeah, the regret.
The regret that inevitably follows leaders, or maybe just regular people, whose unchecked ambition just toppled them, or maybe worse, caused them to inflict real pain on others around them.
And we see this devastating pattern play out constantly, especially in high-profile corporate scandals, right? Particularly here in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. Think about those executives who were hailed as titans of industry. You know the type. The ones chasing super aggressive quarterly benchmarks, maybe fudging the numbers a bit.
Or sacrificing everything else.
Everything. Ethical standards, family relationships, their own mental health sometimes, just to climb one more rung on that ladder.
And then the moment the market turns, or the truth leaks out,
boom, catastrophic downfall. And it's not just financial, is it? It's often a complete personal and moral implosion.
Right. They gain the fancy corner office, maybe the huge house in the suburbs, but they lose, well, their soul, maybe their legacy, often their family too.
And that regret, Simmons points out, it isn't loud and dramatic usually. It's this quiet, devastating internal knowledge that the whole pursuit was just fundamentally wrong-headed.
Yeah. But what Simmons provides is an antidote. That's the hopeful part. The sources argue humility isn't just the opposite of that toxic ambition. It's the hidden fuel for lasting impact.
Okay, hidden fuel. Let's break down that mechanism you mentioned earlier. How does that work?
Well, think about pride. By its very nature, it's externally contingent, right? It needs constant attention. It demands external validation, constant comparison with others.
So it's needy.
Very needy, and it burns bright and fast, which often leads to ethical shortcuts. Why? Because the ultimate goal is self-glorification, not sustainable contribution.
Right. So when the applause stops.
When the external praise stops, the prideful person often crumbles because there's no inner reserve. Their whole sense of self was built on that shaky external foundation.
Okay, so that's pride. How does humility differ then? How does it provide that resilience, that sustainability you talked about?
Humility does the opposite. It grounds the leader, or just the person, in reality. It forces an accurate self-assessment. You have to accept your limitations, your blind spots.
Which sounds like weakness initially.
It sounds like it, but paradoxically, that acceptance actually makes them stronger. Why? Because they know when to ask for help, and more importantly, how to ask for genuine help.
Right.
They learn to delegate effectively, to seek wise counsel from others. They aren't afraid of vulnerability because their core identity isn't invested in pretending to be perfect.
So it's not about pretending.
Exactly. This approach is inherently sustainable. It builds character slowly, methodically, like growing a deep root system. It's not demanding that brittle, surface-level perfection that pride insists on.
That makes a lot of sense. And this idea feels hugely relevant right now in our fast scroll culture of 2025. Simmons connects this hunger for authenticity directly to the relentless pressure of social media facades.
Oh, definitely. Especially in American culture, there's just immense pressure, isn't there, to maintain that perfectly filtered, curated online persona. The highlight reel, the best life narrative.
All the time.
And that pressure, it creates this deep sort of generalized insecurity. We're spending huge amounts of emotional energy basically maintaining a lie or at least a partial truth.
Yeah, it's draining.
So the sources argue that the deep satisfaction Simmons talks about, it comes when we finally swap that filter for true authenticity. Think about the influencer culture online. So much of it is performance, constant performance. But the people who often draw genuine, lasting loyalty, they're often the ones willing to share their struggles, their flaws, their vulnerability.
The ones who drop the mask.
Exactly, they drop the mask. And that quiet, authentic connection, that's what the world is genuinely hungry for. It turns out the person who stops chasing the spotlight often finds that the light, paradoxically, shines on them naturally. Why? Because they're finally being real.
That's a powerful thought. And that's really the reflection Simmons offers us in this first chapter, isn't it? It forces us to confront our own, maybe, performance anxiety.
It does.
So I'd ask you, the listener, to reflect. Where in your professional life, or maybe even just in your online presence, are you using a filter instead of showing real authenticity? What relationship maybe would be instantly repaired if you just dropped the facade and admitted a struggle or a mistake?
Yeah, that's a challenging question to sit with.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. Okay, moving into Chapter 2, Unmasking the Pride Trap. Here, Simmons gets pretty tactical. The tension definitely rises because he identifies pride as this sneaky thief.
The sneaky thief. I like that framing.
Yeah, this destructive force that poisons relationships, poisons dreams, often without us even realizing we've been robbed until it's way too late.
Right. It's that moment where the ego just slams the door shut when a simple human apology could have swung it wide open again.
Exactly.
Simmons emphasizes that really painful emotional peak, where friendships are fundamentally fractured, maybe permanently, by one-upmanship, or just the sheer inability to admit fault. It's an immediate relationship killer.
Let's try to make that concrete. Consider a specific scenario, something really common, maybe in competitive, highly individualized American life, perhaps in professional networking groups, or even those highly stratified suburban communities where keeping up appearances is huge. Imagine two friends. They're both climbing the corporate ladder. They genuinely care for each other. But the moment one achieves something the other hasn't say, one gets that VP promotion while the other feels stuck. Pride can step right in.
How does it manifest?
Well, maybe it prevents the successful friend from offering genuine, unpatronizing support. They might feel awkward or even subtly boastful. And it prevents the other friend from offering genuine, unqualified celebration. There's envy, comparison.
So they start prioritizing winning, that subtle social comparison game, over just maintaining the natural bond they had.
Precisely. This competitive status game, which feels so baked into some environments, it actively ruins natural camaraderie and trust.
And that happens, Simmons argues, because pride masquerades as confidence. This distinction is so critical, we really need to spend some time unpacking it.
Okay, pride versus confidence. Let's go there.
Okay, so genuine confidence. It's rooted in competence. It comes from knowing your value, having a pretty accurate assessment of your actual abilities. It doesn't need to shout from the rooftops. It's usually calm, grounded.
Right. It knows itself.
Exactly. Pride, conversely, is rooted entirely in this fragile need for external validation and, crucially, superiority. It's a perpetual comparison game.
Always looking over your shoulder.
Constantly. And if your focus is always on being superior, you're constantly scanning the room, consciously or unconsciously, looking for people to, well, tear down or at least keep safely below you in the pecking order.
So if confidence says, I am capable, pride is basically saying, I am better than you.
Exactly. That's the core difference. And that relentless need for superiority, it erodes trust from the inside out. It just has to.
How so?
Well, when people sense, even subtly, that your validation comes at their expense, that you need them to be slightly less successful or slightly less smart for you to feel okay, they instinctively retreat.
Yeah, you feel that.
You do. They recognize that your ultimate loyalty is to your own ego, not to the relationship, not to the team, not to the shared goal.
Okay, but let me push back on Simmons a little here. Because in many high-stakes American environments, think about a tough negotiation, a make-or-break product launch, even a political debate being perceived as really confident, maybe even bordering on arrogant, is often rewarded, at least immediately.
Right. That's a fair point.
If you try to be too humble, if you say, well, honestly, I'm still learning here, you might actually lose the deal or lose the audience. So how does Simmons reconcile that need for competitive swagger sometimes with this call for quiet strength?
That's a really important challenge. And I think Simmons would argue he's talking about long-term relational capital versus short-term transactional wins.
Okay. Explain that difference.
That swagger. It might win you the immediate negotiation, get you the contract signed today, but it's the humility, the willingness to listen, the focus on shared value, that's what builds the long-term partnership, the repeat business, the deep trust.
So one is a sprint, the other's a marathon.
Kind of. And what's really interesting in our modern context, say 2025, is how the market itself seems to be starting to demand the latter more and more.
How so?
Well, think about the explosion of corporate vulnerability workshops, emotional literacy training in U.S. companies. These aren't just feel-good exercises anymore.
No, they're seen as performance enhancers sometimes.
Exactly. Companies are realizing that psychological safety, the feeling that you can speak up, admit mistakes, be vulnerable without punishment is absolutely key to innovation, to risk-taking, to collaboration.
So these workshops are basically teaching old truths in new packages.
In essence, yes. They're teaching people that showing weakness appropriately, like admitting an error in front of your team or sharing uncertainty about a project's direction, is actually the fastest way to build connection and collaborative resilience. They're learning that pride creates brittle, risk-averse teams where nobody wants to stick their neck out.
So the challenge isn't about getting rid of competence or confidence. It's about letting go of the need to be perceived as infallible, especially in front of those you lead or those you love.
That's it, exactly. The struggle is letting go of always needing to win every argument, every interaction, in order to unlock those deeper bonds.
Okay.
So the reflection Simmons provides from this chapter, it really challenges you, the listener, directly. Identify the areas where you habitually prioritize being right. Having the last word, proving your spouse wrong about some trivial detail, correcting a colleague maybe a bit too publicly in a meeting.
Ouch, yeah.
And then ask yourself honestly, is that intellectual satisfaction of being right in that moment truly worth the emotional cost, the cost of isolation, the damage to the relationship?
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. All right, Chapter 3. Walking in the Master's Footsteps. This feels like a major shift in energy, doesn't it? We're moving from defense-avoiding pride to something more proactive.
Definitely. It's the turning point.
Yeah.
Here, Simmons emphasizes the ultimate example of humility, which he frames as a life of intentional service. And this fundamentally flips our traditional ideas about power completely upside down.
How so? What does true authority look like in this model?
It looks like service. It means we stop focusing just on avoiding the negative fallout of pride and start actively, intentionally embracing the positive, the deliberate, often quiet choice of serving others.
Simmons uses these vivid scenes, right? of quiet sacrifice amid chaos.
Exactly. It's about making that intentional choice, maybe, to take the back seat when your ego wants the front row, allowing someone else to shine, even when you could grab the spotlight, in a world that's constantly screaming for attention.
That reminds me of some incredible people you sometimes hear about, especially in the U.S. nonprofit sector, or maybe just highly respected community leaders who fly under the radar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Think about a local community organizer, maybe working in an underserved urban neighborhood for, like,
Yeah.
decades,
Yeah.
quietly, persistently.
Right? Building trust year after year.
Exactly. They've generated measurable, incredible impact. Maybe they built educational centers, secured vital funding, genuinely changed thousands of lives in tangible ways, yet they actively reject public acclaim.
You see that. They constantly deflect praise back to the volunteers or to the people in the community they serve.
Their authority, their influence, it isn't derived from a fancy title or a plaque on the wall. It's based entirely on that sustained, quiet, often grueling service. That quiet sacrifice is what truly magnetizes people to follow them, to trust their judgment. It's a different kind of power.
And that sustained character, built through service, is the key idea Simmons drives home here. True. Lasting influence flows from selflessness, not self-promotion.
Okay. So positional power versus character power.
Right. If your authority is derived purely from your position, you're the CEO, you're the senator, well, that power often dissolves the moment the title is gone. You retire, you lose the election, and poof.
Your influence evaporates.
Often, yeah. But when authority is derived from genuine selflessness and consistent service, it creates this magnetic, enduring form of leadership. People follow the character, the person, because they know deep down that leaders' motivations are fundamentally pure, or at least aimed at the common good.
In the current landscape, thinking about 2025, this message feels incredibly pointed, almost urgent. We've seen wave after wave of leadership scandals, haven't we? Across tech, finance, politics.
It seems constant.
Leaders focused purely on self-gain, maximizing shareholder value at literally any cost. Or just securing personal power, often at the direct expense of ethics or the public good.
And that self-serving pattern, that relentless focus on me, it has led to this massive public demand, this hunger for accountability, for a return to fundamental ethical principles in leadership.
You see it everywhere.
Precisely. And you see the challenge playing out very specifically in places like Silicon Valley, for example. Think about the ongoing discourse demanding ethical AI or human-centered design.
What does human-centered even mean in that context, really?
Well, stripped down, what is human-centered design? It's essentially the practical application of humble, service-oriented principles to technology development.
Okay, interesting.
It means designing systems that genuinely try to elevate the user experience, protect their data, empower them, rather than systems designed primarily to exploit user attention simply for maximizing profit or engagement metrics.
So it's about serving the user, not just using them.
Exactly. Simmons is basically linking these contemporary cutting-edge demands for ethics in technology straight back to this core ancient principle of humble serving leadership. It's not a new idea, just a newly urgent application.
It's like the difference between building a magnificent cathedral for the community versus building a giant statue of yourself holding a tiny model cathedral.
That's a perfect analogy, yes. The humble leader focuses on building the structure that serves the whole community, not the monument to themselves.
So the reflection Simmons leaves us with here is really powerful. Emulating this path of service, it doesn't diminish you. It actually elevates everyone around you.
Right.
He asks us to visualize one area, just one, where you could elevate others by intentionally stepping back this week. What might that look like?
Maybe letting a junior colleague take the lead on a pitch, even if you know you could do it faster or maybe even better in the short term.
Or maybe giving your partner real control over a major household decision without hovering or offering that passive-aggressive commentary we sometimes do.
Exactly. That simple act of stepping back, of trusting them, it empowers them. It reinforces their competence and builds the relationship in a way that taking control never could.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update and continue to next. Okay, Chapter 4, Answering the Call Within. This chapter feels like the pivotal moment, doesn't it? It's where we have to choose whether or not we're actually going to apply these lessons we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's framed very much as an urgent invitation, a call to shed those old, comfortable, but ultimately destructive, prideful skins.
And it demands a moment of, well, difficult, maybe even painful surrender.
Simmons captures that emotional surge of surrender quite beautifully, I think. He compares it to dawn breaking after a long, dark night of doubt.
Aye.
It's that moment when the ego, finally exhausted from constantly maintaining the facade, just admits, I cannot sustain this anymore. I need help, or I need fundamental change.
It's intensely personal, that moment. And it often seems to happen during some kind of crisis, big or small.
Often, yes, the breaking point.
That analogy of surrender is really potent. I often think about it in terms of a difficult but necessary career pivot.
Okay, how so?
Imagine someone, maybe a high-earning individual in, say, finance or law. They're clinging desperately to a grueling, prestigious career path. Why? Strictly because of the external status, the salary, the expectations. Even though it's actively making them miserable, impacting their health, maybe their family life.
Right, golden handcuffs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sheer humility required to finally admit, this path is fundamentally wrong for me. Or even just, I have failed to find genuine satisfaction here. It's immense. But that admission, that's the critical point of surrender that opens the door to potentially a greater, more peaceful, more authentic path forward.
That's a great example. And you see a similar dynamic, perhaps even more profoundly, in the U.S. context, with the decision to enter recovery for addiction.
Absolutely.
That requires the ultimate humbling, doesn't it? Admitting complete powerlessness over the substance or behavior, admitting dependence on something larger than oneself, whether it's a higher power, a community, a program. That's a profound, I cannot do this alone.
Yeah.
I cannot. That's the core of it.
And this leads us directly into the key idea of this chapter.
Yeah.
Humility demands daily, continuous choices. It's not just a one-time dramatic surrender event.
It's a practice.
It's a continuous redirection of the ego, consciously turning that default me-first thinking into us-together thinking. Change, real change, is necessarily incremental.
Little choices adding up.
Exactly. If you consciously start defining yourself more by how you treat others in those small daily interactions, the little moments of deference, of active listening, of sharing credit when your ego wants to grab it, that continuous effort eventually starts to shift your core character from the inside out. It rewires you, slowly. We absolutely have to link this to the rising burnout statistics, the generalized anxiety we're seeing everywhere, particularly across the American workforce. This high pressure, always-on society creates these massive external demands that are constantly screaming, me first, achieve more, compete harder.
They really do. And Simmons connects this deep internal search for peace directly to the explosive popularity of things like mindfulness apps, meditation, various wellness practices.
Yeah, they're everywhere now.
And that's where I think we need to push on the nuance a little bit. Simmons suggests listening to the quiet voice within. But are these popular wellness trends a genuine path to that? Or are they sometimes just a temporary band-aid for a fundamentally toxic me-first system?
What do you mean? Like wellness is another performance tool?
Kind of. The challenge is that while many American mindfulness apps, for instance, do a great job blending insights from faith traditions and psychological science to encourage presence, gratitude, and calm, they can be co-opted by the ego. Well, if you use mindfulness simply to optimize your performance so you can compete even harder, climb the ladder faster, make more money, is that really humility? Or is that just pride in disguise, maybe wearing a fancy cashmere meditation cloak?
Ah, I see. So it's the intention behind the practice, not just the practice itself, that determines if it's building humility or just polishing the ego.
Exactly. True humility shifts the intention from performance, how can I be better, faster, calmer, so that I can achieve more, to presence, just being open.
Okay.
Humility enables you to quiet those relentless external demands, the pressure to achieve, to compete, to compare, and instead, finally, listen to that quieter internal voice, the one that values connection, character, and meaning over titles and status. That fundamental shift in direction, that's the practical application of humility in our high-pressure, demanding society.
So the challenge from Simmons in this chapter is really stark. Will you heed that quiet voice calling you to rise by paradoxically kneeling, by surrendering the ego's demands?
Yeah. And practically speaking, maybe I'd invite you, the listener, to consider what specific daily me-first habits you might need to trade for more us-together thinking.
Like what? Give an example.
Is it always insisting on your preference for the family vacation destination?
Right.
Or maybe interrupting a colleague in a Zoom meeting just to make your point before they've even finished theirs?
Oof. Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are. But recognizing those small, seemingly insignificant daily acts of ego denial, that's the true birthplace of cultivating humility. It starts small.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. Okay, now we shift our focus outwards again, but this time it gets really personal. Chapter 5, weaving humility into bonds.
Yeah.
This feels like maybe the most painful, but also potentially the most rewarding testing ground.
Absolutely, because it shows how humility or the lack of it mends or breaks the most delicate and vital threads of our lives. Our families, our closest friendships, our romantic partnerships.
This is where pride causes the most intense, the most immediate, and often the most lasting damage, isn't it?
Without a doubt, relationships are the ego's favorite playground, unfortunately. But Simmons also explores the flip side, these powerful stories of apologies. Real apologies. The kind that successfully rebuild bridges that seemed completely burnt.
Transforming those awful, cold, tense silences back into shared laughter, genuine affection,
Yeah,
reconnection.
the warmth of reconnection.
And the detail here really matters because we've all experienced fake apologies, right? A proud apology isn't really an apology at all. It's just a defense mechanism.
Right. It's an attempt to minimize your own fault, maybe shift some blame back onto the other
I'm
person.
sorry you felt that way, or I'm sorry, but you also did.
Exactly. Those non-apologies. A truly humble apology, as the sources really emphasize, it has to be specific. It has to be unconditional, and its focus needs to be entirely on the other person's pain and their experience, not on your intent, not on your justification.
Ouch. That's hard, focusing only on their pain.
It is hard. You can't start a real apology with, I'm sorry, but.
Yeah.
The focus has to be on fully owning the impact your actions had, regardless of what you intended. That's the emotional sting, really admitting fault without caveats that ultimately leads to the warmth and relief of genuine reconnection.
Okay, so that's the apology piece. What's the broader key idea here for relationships?
The key idea Simmons distills is actually profound, yet sounds simple. In relationships, humility listens louder than it speaks.
Listens louder than it speaks. Okay.
Think about active listening. True active listening is fundamentally an act of humility. Why? Because it requires you to temporarily suspend your own agenda.
Your internal monologue.
Completely suspend your plan rebuttal, your brilliant advice you're dying to give, your need to jump in with your own story or defense. You consciously pause your own internal dialogue just to fully receive and, crucially, validate the other person's reality, even if you don't agree with it.
Just trying to understand their world for a moment.
Exactly. That suspension of self-focus is often the hardest, but also the most powerful act of love and respect you can offer someone.
This whole concept, active listening, radical vulnerability, it feels huge in the modern workplace too, doesn't it? Especially with the big focus on emotional intelligence, particularly in dispersed and remote teams. That's a major dynamic, often a stressed one, for American professionals today.
Oh, absolutely critical. Think about the sheer complexity of trying to maintain hybrid harmony in these dispersed U.S. teams. Communication is often asynchronous, quick Slack messages, clicked emails.
Tone gets lost so easily.
Instantly. Tone is lost, context is missing, assumptions run wild, misunderstanding becomes rampant. Humility, in that context, becomes the essential lubricant for smooth functioning.
Lubricant, interesting. How does it lubricate?
Well, it means proactively asking clarifying questions instead of immediately assuming a negative tone or jumping to conclusions based on a poorly worded email.
Yeah.
It means maybe acknowledging a colleague's potential stress or home pressures without judgment, giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay, so it's about reducing friction caused by assumptions.
Precisely. When you practice that kind of humble inquiry and active listening, you dramatically mitigate the risk of those ego-driven misinterpretations that can instantly derail collaboration and trust, especially when you're not face-to-face.
That really speaks to this idea of compassionate release that Simmons talks about. That the strongest ties aren't forged in control, but in this compassionate release. Can you break that down for us? What does he mean by compassionate release? Is it just setting boundaries, or is it something more like radical acceptance?
I think it's closer to radical acceptance, although it often does require setting healthy boundaries too. It primarily means letting go of your intense need for a specific controlling outcome from the relationship or the interaction.
Letting go of the outcome.
Yeah, it's about letting the other person be who they are, flaws, annoying habits, different perspectives and all, letting the conversation go where it naturally needs to go, even if it challenges your comfort zone or your preferred narrative.
So releasing that tight grip of control.
Exactly. Releasing that tight grip you often unconsciously place on those closest to you, maybe because you genuinely believe you know what's best for them or what's best for the relationship dynamic. It's about trusting them enough, respecting them enough to allow them the dignity of their own choices, their own struggles, their own journey, even if it makes you anxious.
Okay, that's a big ask. So listener, here's the question for you from this chapter. Where are you currently trying to control an outcome in a key relationship? Maybe with your teenage child, a challenging colleague, your spouse. And what would that active, humble, compassionate release of control actually look like in practice, starting today? Like, subscribe, and share for more update and continue to next. All right, Chapter 6 takes us back into the realm of leadership, but with a twist. Leading from the shadows. This feels like a really dramatic redefinition of what leadership even is.
It really is. Simmons argues here that true authority, the kind that lasts, isn't a crown you wear or a title you flaunt. It's a humble art. An art of service and, crucially, elevation of others.
The climax narratives in this chapter, they focus on those quiet mentors, don't they? The kind of leader who inspires fierce, genuine loyalty without ever having to demand it or pull rank.
Exactly. They somehow managed to create this rush of collective triumph, a real team win, precisely because they intentionally stepped back. They shared the credit generously, they highlighted the specific efforts of others. It's the absolute antithesis of the narcissistic limelight-stealing leader we unfortunately see too often.
This feels incredibly relevant in today's more fluid, often less hierarchical professional environment. You see this dynamic playing out in, say, innovative U.S. startups, or maybe in those highly collaborative tech environments, even in the gig economy where influence is earned daily.
Yeah, absolutely.
The founders or leaders who seem to have the most lasting impact aren't always the loudest or the most charismatic in the traditional sense. They're often the ones who lead by consistently walking the walk.
How so?
They don't hoard accolades or critical information. They intentionally step back in meetings, maybe letting others present the key findings. They share credit publicly and generously. They actively elevate their junior team members during client presentations or important pitches.
They understand a really powerful principle, don't they?
Yeah, that their own success is actually multiplied, not divided, when they empower others. They're focused on growing leaders around them, not just accumulating followers who depend on them.
And that directly reinforces the key idea Simmons is driving at here. Great leaders, humble leaders, lift others higher. And in doing so, they create these positive ripples of change that extend far beyond their direct line of sight or control.
Ripples of change.
Yeah, this is the synthesis of true servant leadership in action. And it scales influence far more effectively in the long run than top-down authoritarian leadership. Why? Because it creates a self-sustaining, empowered culture.
How does that self-sustaining part work?
Well, when employees or team members feel genuinely valued, trusted, publicly affirmed, and given real responsibility, they don't need constant micromanagement or external motivation. They internalize the ethos. They start to replicate that same behavior, service, accountability, mutual support that they witnessed and experienced from their leader. The culture starts to perpetuate itself.
Okay, but I have to ask the skeptical question here. The question that any ambitious, driven professional, especially one working in a competitive meritocracy, would surely ask.
Go for it.
If I continually step back, if I keep pushing my junior colleagues into the spotlight, how do I ensure my own visibility, for promotions, for salary bumps, for career progression? Isn't that kind of political suicide in a dog-eat-dog corporate environment? How does Simmons reconcile this quiet service with the practical need for performance review visibility?
That is the crucial tension, isn't it? The practical reality check. And Simmons addresses it, I believe, by drawing a distinction between short-term transactional reputation and long-term deep relational capital.
Transactional versus relational capital.
Okay. Yes. While those short-term visible wins definitely matter, hitting your numbers, leading a successful project. The leader who consistently prioritizes the success and growth of their team over their own immediate glory builds something much more valuable. Profound relational capital.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning people trust them implicitly. They know this leader has their back, that they're invested in their success, not just using them as stepping stones. So when performance review time comes around, or when promotions are being discussed, that leader's reputation is cemented not primarily by their own bragging or self-promotion,
But by the results of their team.
partly, yes, but also by the chorus of colleagues, subordinates, maybe even peers who will vouch for them. People who genuinely owe some of their own success or growth to that leader's mentorship and empowerment. This kind of character-based reputation, this deep trust, it creates a legacy that's surprisingly recession-proof and politically enduring. It's much less fragile than the visibility sought by the purely self-promotional leader. It's fundamentally the long game of leadership.
Wow. Okay, that's a really fascinating reframe. The humility, ironically, makes you indispensable in a different way. Not because you hoard control, but because you become the engine that powers everyone else's success.
That's a great way to put it.
The inspiration from this chapter feels really clear then. You actually step into the light more effectively by empowering those who are already standing in it, or who deserve to be.
Absolutely. So here's a direct challenge for you, the listener, based on this chapter. Can you find just one person this week whom you can actively mentor or lift up? Maybe nominate them for an internal award or go out of your way to highlight their specific contribution in a major meeting or email chain. And then this is the key part. Intentionally focus only on their success in that moment and notice the deep, quiet satisfaction you get from their triumph rather than chasing your own fleeting moment of glory. See how that feels.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. Okay, Chapter 7. Harvesting Humility's Gifts. This feels like where the payoff starts to become really clear and tangible. It's the uplifting turn, isn't it? Where Simmons unveils the unexpected, almost counterintuitive benefits of living this way.
Yeah, it's about the rewards. Deep inner peace, a sense of clarity, and these almost serendipitous opportunities that seem to arise specifically because you've lowered your ego's defenses.
The emotional high in this chapter seems to come from reflecting on lives, real stories perhaps, that were fundamentally redirected, often for the better, by seemingly small acts of grace or humility.
Exactly. It's those moments where maybe a significant professional opportunity or a healed relationship arose precisely because a person finally had the courage and the humility to say those difficult words, I was wrong, or I made a mistake, or simply, I need help.
Let's try to deepen that anecdote, makes it really specific. Imagine a mid-career professional in a super competitive American industry, maybe software development in Boston or marketing in New York. And they hit a major project failure, a massive technological setback maybe, or a campaign that bombs, costing the company significant time and money. The typical prideful response might be what?
Cover it up, maybe subtly shift blame to the team or external factors, or just retreat and hope nobody notices too much. Avoidance.
Right. But the humble response, though excruciating in the moment, is necessary. It might look like standing up in a postmortem meeting, facing the failure honestly,
Yeah.
publicly acknowledging their specific role or deficiencies,
Owning it.
owning it,
Yeah.
and then, crucially, asking a successful colleague or maybe a mentor they respect for specific structured guidance. How do I fix this mess? How do I prevent this from happening again? What did I miss?
That act of humbling themselves, of admitting, I don't actually know the answer here and I failed, it breaks down that professional barrier of always needing to appear competent and in control.
Oh, what happens then?
Well, Simmons suggests this can often lead, perhaps unexpectedly, to a much deeper mentorship relationship. Or maybe even a serendipitous new opportunity arises from that conversation, perhaps a chance to lead a smaller, less visible, but ultimately more innovative project where they can actually learn and apply those lessons. An opportunity they never would have even seen, let alone been offered, had they remained entrenched in their need to be perceived as infallible.
So the ego blockage gets removed and opportunity flows in.
That's the idea. The blockage is removed.
And that perfectly illustrates the key idea of the chapter. Humility invites abundance. Specifically, Simmons argues, by quieting the soul's unrest. Psychologically, we need to really understand the mechanism here. When you finally remove that constant energy-draining need to be perfect or to be right all the time,
Yeah.
where does all that freed up mental energy go?
That's a great question. It creates cognitive space. You literally stop spending vast amounts of your precious mental energy defending your ego, calculating how to look good in the next meeting, nursing old resentments or perceived slights.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is exhausting. And that liberated cognitive space, it naturally opens up for things like gratitude, for genuine curiosity about others and the world, and for recognizing opportunities that were probably there all along, but you were too self-absorbed to notice.
And the inner peace part.
Inner conflict, that constant tension between the mask you wear for the world and the reality of who you are, with all your flaws and insecurities, that tension is a primary driver of anxiety and unrest. When that tension is significantly released through acts of humility and self-acceptance, you begin to experience the profound inner peace that Simmons discusses. It's the peace of authenticity.
This ties in so directly with these massive mental wellness trends we're seeing everywhere now. The incredible popularity of gratitude journaling, meditation apps like Calm and Headspace, these are soaring, especially among high-achieving, stressed-out professionals in the U.S. dealing with those ever-present 2025 anxiety spikes.
They absolutely are. And these tools often explicitly promote gratitude, which, as we've discussed, is inextricable linked to humility. You can't really be genuinely grateful if you're consumed by pride and entitlement.
Right. Gratitude forces a perspective shift.
Exactly. Away from what you lack or what you think you're owed, and towards appreciating what you already have. And this practice, we know from scientific research now, is proven to reduce anxiety, lower stress hormones like cortisol. Simmons is essentially arguing, I think, that humility is the pathway to sustained gratitude and therefore to sustain mental wellness because it removes the primary internal obstacle, that relentless self-focus, that egocentric view that prevents peace from taking root.
So the message is, embrace humility and watch fulfillment actually start to chase you. It's a complete inversion of how we're typically taught to pursue success and happiness.
It really is a total inversion. So, for the reflection here, maybe I'd invite you, the listener, to actively track, just for this week, one tangible gift, however small, that arises in your life. It could be a surprising moment of genuine peace, a new opportunity, however minor, or a particularly meaningful connection with someone. And try to trace it back. Did this gift arise precisely because you chose the humble path in a specific situation instead of the prideful one? Make it a concrete observation. See what you find.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update, and continue to next. And that brings us to Chapter 8, the conclusion, nurturing a lasting humble heart. Here, Simmons really brings the whole journey full circle. The focus shifts intensely to sustainability. How do we make sure these insights don't just become a temporary enthusiasm, a brief humility kick, but actually develop into enduring, lifelong habits?
Right. It's about making it stick. And the final emotional release here, the big vision, it focuses squarely on enduring legacy. Simmons analyzes that crucial difference between a temporary surge of positional power, the brief flash of a celebrity CEO or a politician in the spotlight, and a truly lasting, towering impact that's defined by character.
The vision is almost like humble roots growing slowly but surely into these towering oaks of influence.
That's a beautiful image for it. What defines you years later, maybe even after you're gone, isn't the absolute height of your career peak, but the depth of your character and the positive impact you had on the growth and well-being of others. That, Simmons argues, is the definition of true lasting power, not fleeting fame or status.
So the key idea for making it last is that humility isn't a destination you arrive at. It's more like a garden.
Exactly. A garden that needs to be tended daily with real intention and, importantly, with grace for yourself when you mess up. It's a continuous, dynamic process, not a static achievement.
Which means daily maintenance.
Yeah.
Right. What does that look like practically?
Simmons suggests specific practices become habitual. Things like regular self-reflection, honestly asking yourself at the end of the day, where did my ego take over today? Where could I have been more humble? Also, actively seeking correction, having trusted friends or mentors who you explicitly give permission to point out your blind spots or your prideful moments.
That takes courage.
It takes real courage. And finally, practicing forgiveness, both forgiving others when their egos flare up, but also, crucially, forgiving yourself when you inevitably falter on this path. Because you will. It's a practice, not a permanent state of perfection.
That really aligns well with some of the broader, slow growth and sustainability mindsets that seem to be gaining traction today, maybe as a reaction against the constant pressure for speed.
I think so, too. Look at the spectrum of U.S. business models, for instance. On one extreme, you have the traditional venture capital model that often demands blitzscaling, incredibly rapid, often unstable growth, that frequently prioritizes speed and market share above all else, sometimes even above quality, ethics, or employee well-being.
Growth at any cost.
Pretty much. Simmons, implicitly at least, is contrasting this with a more sustainable, long-term approach. The kind often favored by smaller, perhaps more ethical American businesses, or even divisions within larger companies focusing on longevity. Those that prioritize quality of relationships with customers and employees, community impact, and building something solid over just hyper-speed financial returns.
It's like that image again.
Yeah.
A slow-growing, humble oak tree is far more enduring, far more resilient to economic storms or changing trends than a fragile, flashy, flash-in-the-pan enterprise built primarily on ego and unsustainable metrics.
Precisely. It's the difference between maybe investing in a super volatile, hyped-up stock versus investing in solid, essential bedrock infrastructure. One might give you a quicker thrill, but the other provides lasting value and stability.
Right.
And that perspective leads directly to Simmons's final embrace of the concept, The humble life isn't some kind of passive ending like you've given up. It's actually the eternal beginning. It's the start of authentic living.
An eternal beginning. I like that.
Yeah. It's the summation of the entire journey he's taken us on. His conclusion is that humility is not passive acceptance of defeat or inherent weakness. It is active, quiet strength. It's the continuous, intentional choice, day after day, to prioritize service, truth, and connection over the loud, seductive, but ultimately hollow demands of the ego and the facade.
Wow. Okay. That brings us powerfully to the end of our really in-depth chapter-by-chapter deep dive into Richard E. Simmons III's The Power of a Humble Life Journey.
Yeah.
#tag outro.
So let's try to bring it all together now and maybe quickly recap this quite intensive 8-step journey just to solidify the core action steps we've uncovered for you, the learner.
Good idea. Let's crystallize it.
We started with chapter 1, acknowledging the deep hunger for humility in our world, realizing that true authenticity has to replace those draining facades.
Right. Then in chapter 2, we focused on unmasking the pride trap, learning that real humility requires listening much louder than we speak, and prioritizing the relationship over the need to win arguments. Chapter 3, Walking in the Master's Footsteps, showed us that genuine influence comes from selfless service, which ultimately overrides the mere pursuit of titles or status.
Then chapter 4, Answering the Call Within, urged us to make those consistent, daily, us-together choices to combat our internal burnout and ego-driven striving.
Then we got personal in chapter 5, weaving humility into bonds, discovering that strong relationships require compassionate release of control, not tighter grips.
Very key. Chapter 6, Leading from the Shadows, redefined leadership as lifting others higher, building lasting relational capital instead of just seeking personal glory.
Chapter 7, Harvesting Humility's Gifts, revealed the surprising rewards, trading internal conflict for genuine peace and often stumbling into unexpected abundance and opportunity.
And finally, chapter 8, Nurturing a Lasting Humble Heart, committed us to the ongoing daily practice, the garden, tending through intentional self-reflection, seeking correction, and practicing forgiveness.
That's quite a journey.
It really is. And the relevance of this work for you listening today feels profound. In a world that often feels incredibly noisy, anxious, defined by instability and insecurity, this quiet strength, Simmons talks about, the kind built on deep, genuine character. It might just be the most disruptive, the most effective, and certainly the most sustainable tool you have available for real personal and professional growth. It is, arguably, the power that truly lasts when all the noise fades away.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something for you to really mull over, to chew on, as you think about integrating these powerful principles into your own life, building on Simmons' incredible work.
Okay, here it is. If you were to measure your current success, both professionally and personally, not by the usual metrics, not by how many people report to you or how much money you earn or your job title,
Right.
but instead you measured it specifically by the number of people you have genuinely served, genuinely empowered to grow, genuinely helped to flourish, what would your current scoreboard look like viewed through that lens? And maybe more importantly, how will you consciously, actively adjust your own definition of power, your own measure of a successful life, starting tomorrow?
Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
I'll talk to you next.